Thank you very much for joining us today, Warren. It's brilliant to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Would you mind just telling our listeners a little bit about what you do and what your background is?
Okay. I'm a clinical psychologist by training. That's my profession. And I spent the first part of my career working in the asylums, I suppose, before they were closed, the old long stay hospitals. And then I moved into first episode psychosis services as a therapist, and then later on as a service manager. And then I went into senior management and became clinical director for children and family services in the NHS in Lancashire. And got involved in system change, policy development with the Department of Health, and various kind of national policy change and reform groups. And then after 20 odd years, 24 years in the NHS, I left and set up my own company. So I now run Warren Larkin Associates, inventively titled. And I basically do what I've done since day one, really, which is try and educate people about trauma and adversity and how that leads to, very often, to people struggling to cope in life, and trying to raise awareness about that, but also trying to deliver education and training to organisations and professionals to increase their confidence in working with people who've experienced trauma and adversity. And crucially, one of the things I do a lot of is getting teams, trying to help teams and services to ask people appropriately about adversity so that they can then give them an appropriate therapeutic response. And I write some stuff, and I'm also a visiting professor at University of Sunderland. So that's it.
I think. Say, you're quite busy then, Warren.
Yeah, just like you. Yeah. I think what that means is I'm just not very good at managing my diary. I think that's why I'm busy.
It's like juggling lots of balls, but all very much connected to each other, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, definitely. And it sounds like we have. Well, clearly we met recently, and we've got a lot in common. We've got both in terms of our kind of route into this world of delivering training to professionals, but also in terms of our interest in trauma and, trauma-informed approaches. So, yeah, looking forward to talking to you a bit more about
that. Oh, thank you. I think it'd be really clear to our listeners or the watchers, if they're watching the video of this, of why I've kind of asked you here today. So I sent you out of the blue, really, didn't I? The introduction to my new book, and also the fourth chapter, the Valuesled chapter of the new book.
Now, you made me work for this, didn't you? You didn't tell me I was going to have to do loads of homework, but
lots of reading.
Fortunately, I learned something from it, which was good.
Oh, good. Well, so for the listeners' benefit, really, I don't really know what you're going to say today. So we met through a colleague and actually a family member of yours only a few months back. Yeah. And we found out through our first conversation that we had lots in common with regards to our perspectives, the way that we value people, the way how we work with people, and then some connected kind of historical work elements and things like that. And then we've talked under the umbrella of the Resilience Task Force, which is a fantastic campaign that you're running at the moment. So that's kind of how we got into contact with each other. So we don't know each other particularly well. And then I sent you the introduction to my new book and chapter 4 and asked you if you would tell me your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so you want me to do a live review of your book on this broadcast? That's very risky strategy.
I know. Ish, and I say ish because I sent it very specifically with respect to one of the elements that kind of sits under our values-led approach. So we talked just before I clicked record about the training for influence methodology and the four different elements of it. So the expert, the tailored, the engaging, and then the golden thread, which is the values.
Yeah.
But within that golden thread, it's about valuing yourself as a facilitator, valuing your delegates, and then role modeling your delegates, valuing their service users.
Yeah.
And the bit where you're undoubtedly connected is the element within that methodology where we say, if you're delivering to frontline professionals who are delivering services to people who have complex needs and or vulnerabilities, then actually one of the best ways that you can value them is to have an understanding and an overview and a recognition of what trauma-informed practice is, and to deliver your services from a trauma-informed approach.
Yeah.
And that's why, and it's on that basis, not really a full review of.
I know.
Although please do.
I know.
What you think, but
well,
on that basis,
clearly. Well, I suppose just working backwards, I think, I've been talking to groups of people for a very long time about trauma and adversity. Probably for about 21 years, and I was 24. I was trying to change attitudes and beliefs about trauma being important in people's lives. And I went into mental health services at a time when the prevailing view was that poor mental health's all about funny brain chemistry and dodgy genes. So my kind of mission was, when I recognized it for myself, that I needed to kind of change the status quo, change the received wisdom, that isn't the case purely. That's too simple. That actually it's very much about life events for a lot of people. So that's where my interest came. And I think your methodology, your 4 aspects, is really helpful. And I wish I'd known about that when I was starting out, because I think, like most people who end up in training and consultancy, you kind of learn it through experience, don't you? You almost learn it by making lots of mistakes, and you learn it by gathering experiences over the years. But I think if I was starting out, if I was kind of taking on a role where there was a significant amount of training, or if I was taking on a new position, or I was embarking on something where I was going to have to convey a lot of knowledge and skills to people, I think having your book as a guide and your methodology would be really helpful. I think that'd be fantastic for people. So all of those things make perfect sense to me. And like I say, it could save people a lot of time, because you do make a lot of mistakes, and having a framework in your mind which you can check off as you're developing a training course or a seminar or a workshop, that's fantastic, because most people just focus on the content. They focus on the content and go, I need to break it up a bit with an exercise, or I need to make sure I put enough breaks in. So it's for a lot of people, it's very content driven. Or the flip side is, it's very charisma driven. So the content isn't that good, but they've got a lot of charisma, so they managed to get away with it. Or the content's brilliant, but they're really dull to listen to. So I think most of the time, that's what you tend to get. Sometimes you get people who've got all of those things that you describe in your methodology. That it's very values driven. They have absolutely first-hand expertise that they can draw on. The other 2 things that you said as well, they have those 2 things. The tailored approach,
the ability to
to the organisation, of course, that's absolutely crucial. Yeah. And then the final one, which was
engaging in the learning
part of it. It's a different learning styles. So I think you've crammed in what a lot of us have had to learn the hard way, but I think it makes a lot of sense. And then coming on to the values thing, when you work with people with complexity and you're trying to train and educate and support and provide skills for those people, you've got to have a touchstone. You've got to have like you said in your book, a golden thread, which is the values. Because I always remember one of my supervisors saying to me when I was in training, when things are incredibly complicated, because I work with some of the most complex presentations, some of the most complex people, you have to try and make it simple. You can't address complexity with complexity. That doesn't work, So the more complex the client group and the scenarios that you're facing, the more you have to be able to come back to the principles of what you signed up for, the values that drive your practice and your thinking. So when it gets complex, we have to hold on to those constants, which are our values. So yeah, that resonated with me a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad about that, because I think one of the things for me was, as we were driving this methodology, was the fact that we didn't set up to be a training company. It's the fact that we've worked in the sector for so many years and actually we're trying to meet a need. And actually the methodology came from us trying to find a creative solution of being able to give frontline professionals what they need to be able to deliver their services in the best possible way. And one of the things that's really important, and we've talked previously about kind of my history when I was a child and why this means so much to me, and also your experiences when you first started working in the profession, and actually how devastating some of those were. And we've talked previously about that trauma-informed perspective being so important, and actually being a real game changer in the way that people deliver services. And there's a real gap, isn't there, with regards to actually there's a whole host of fantastic academics or clinicians who absolutely know the nth degree and the detail of trauma-informed processes and how to work within them. But equally, there are hundreds and hundreds and thousands actually of frontline practitioners working with people with complex needs, and those people with complex needs will never get to one of the clinicians. They will never get to the academics, and actually they don't need to, but they will still benefit from somebody delivering a service from a trauma perspective.
Well, absolutely. And that's, you know, we talked last time about the work that I do around training professionals to ask about adversity, the REACH program. And that was very much born out of this idea that unless we can have insight into someone's life, unless we can connect with them on some level, how can we possibly know how to help them? You know, unless we ask people what their journey's been, we're just giving them what we think should be the right response. You know, it's a very kind of biomedical approach, isn't it? It's kind of, here's the symptoms that we can see, let's treat it in this way, and then hopefully that'll cure the problem. So I think, you know, one of the key things that I, you know, always have in the forefront of my mind when I'm working with a group of people, a group of staff, or a service or an organisation, is that we all signed up for the same reason. You know, we kind of all signed up because we wanted to help people, we wanted to make a difference, we wanted to contribute to society. And the most powerful tool we've got on all of that is understanding someone's journey and knowing where they've come from, and how they got here. And one of the best things we can do for them is to help them have some perspective on what they've had in their life. So, you know, given I've been through this, it kind of makes sense that I'm struggling with these things. Or given that I've been through these things in my life, it makes sense that I'm having some problems with my mental health. So it allows people to have a bit of compassion for themselves. And then the other thing that I hold very dear is the idea that relationships are the things that make the difference. Relationships are the mechanism for healing. So, you know, like you said, every professional you come into contact with who works with, I read it in your book as well, and you said it to me last time, every professional who works with someone with complexity and vulnerability, they have an opportunity to change that person's life. You know, they have that opportunity. And I think on our podcast last time for the Association of Child Protection Professionals, I told you about the guy I worked with at Prestwich Hospital who hadn't spoken for over 20 years. And then he, after 2 years of trying to get him to talk to me, he eventually spoke to me, which was kind of mind-blowing. And that purely was about the strength of the connection that we had between each other and the trust. I didn't have any therapeutic skills. I was an assistant. I was just learning, you know, I wasn't qualified. But what I had was a strong relationship with this guy. So that idea that we can change someone's direction, someone's trajectory by having a strong connection speaks to the values, doesn't it, about compassion and about, you know, seeing people, seeing beyond what you see, you know, the physicality of somebody, and seeing, you know, inside and what they've been through and maybe where they're going, seeing their humanity. And also this idea of, you know, empathy is not enough. You know, feeling with somebody is kind of, it's a nice thing to do, but actually compassion is empathy coupled with an intention to help somebody. You know, that's what we need. And I think services very often and jobs very often become very technical. So you learn all these skills, you go on all these courses and you learn technical expertise and procedures and complex processes, and particularly nursing and medicine and professions like that and psychology are very technical. And actually, sometimes that gets in the way of us listening to people and hearing them and being with them with the intention to try and alleviate some of the suffering. So ultimately using a compassionate relationship as a way of creating the opportunity for change. So for me, you know, you've got to be really clear in your mind about what the values are that you bring to your role and what the values are that you bring to your training. And part of what I see, you know, like you in your chapter very clearly, one of the opportunities you've got when you're training a group of people is to help them take that step back, you know, get the head out of the day to day and go, why did you sign up for this? What's important to you? What matters? And in the midst of all this chaos, when things are highly complex, what are the simple things that guide your decision making?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I think that's probably what I was reminded of when I read your chapter early on.
Well, it's interesting because we talk about values as being the golden thread, and the trauma-informed element is one part of that. But right from the first thing that people, when they come into any sessions from somebody who's been trained for our methodology, one of the first things that we do in the introductions is talk about what is your why, and connect them back to their emotional reason for joining this role in the first place. Yeah. And then we purposely, through the training courses, we teach people, teach the facilitators to be able to distance the delegate from all of the noise that's happening. So all of the austerity measures, the fact that their caseload is twice as big as it was 2 months ago, the fact that COVID now means that they can't see people face to face, or whatever it is, we get people to disconnect from that noise for a moment and emotionally reconnect to the reason they joined the job in the first place. Yeah. And if we can bring them back down, if we can get their kind of the other side of their brain working, if we can get their kind of emotional intelligence kind of fizzling a little bit, then as we go through the session, they're going to be absorbing the information.
I totally agree. And I totally relate to that, because one of the things I said to the people, the associates, the people I work with who help me in delivering my work, I always say to them, you know, your job is to make those people care about the things that you care about, you know, to get them to feel emotional about it. So they go away feeling something strongly one way or the other. You know, we don't want anybody going away going, yeah, well, it was all right. We want them to be provoked into an emotional experience. And ultimately, if you get it right, it's an awesome experience, i.e. they feel a sense of awe, like, oh my God, I see the world in a different way. Or I see the world clearer in terms of why I signed up in the first place. I remember those reasons and those feelings for doing this job. It's exactly what you're saying, you know. So I think you have to kind of remind people of the reasons of their why, if you like, of their reasons for getting out of bed. And I think because things are so pressured at the minute, and because things are so stressful and tiring, there's a real value, there's even more value in doing that, because we know that when people are connected to their values and their raison d'etre, their why, that's what sustains people in difficult times. You know, that discretionary effort that the NHS, for example, relies on to function, that 30% of discretionary effort, people going the extra mile, that is about knowing your reason for being in that job.
Yeah.
And if you forget that, you're just going through the motions, you're just turning up for the paycheck. And I don't think you can do a job where you work with complexity and you work with people who are suffering from vulnerability or having tough life experiences. I don't think you should be doing a job like that if you've become too far removed from your reasons for doing that. You know, that isn't a job, that's a vocation, you know.
Absolutely. And I think we have to be kind to our frontline professionals in recognising that compassion fatigue is real. Do you know, it really is. Yeah. And you might go into a role absolutely knowing what your why is and having all of the good intentions in the world, and actually time, situation, complexities, your own life external to work, all of those things can actually really influence your own emotional resilience. And then time after time after time, I've certainly been in situations and I've had to take a break or move roles or do something different where actually I couldn't listen to that any longer. Do you know, for me, for my own emotional resilience, I knew that actually I wasn't being a good professional. Do you know, I have a mantra: if you've done everything you can possibly do to the best of your ability within the constraints of your role, then that's all you can do. And I kind of live my life by that, and I say that up to people on courses all of the time. So Sometimes though, we get to the position where actually we can't do the best that we can do. We're not able to.
Yeah.
And at that point, we need to recognise and do something about it. And
I agree.
That's absolutely entwined within kind of the values element as well.
Totally, Tom. That's one of the other things that stood out, is this idea of self-care. You know, that's got to be, looking after yourself has got to be one of the values, hasn't it? Because if you're in a role where you use your relationship as a way of helping people, as that's your medium for change, you have to be in a good place yourself. You have to have something left to give, you know. So I think caring for yourself is a fundamental priority when you're doing a caring profession, you know, doing a caring job. But one of my values is, if we're not caring for the people that care for the people, they're not going to last very long. They're going to end up with compassion fatigue. They're going to end up with secondary trauma or vicarious trauma. And that's in nobody's interests.
But to be fair, that's literally the whole kind of reason behind the methodology in this way, because we, after 20 years in the sector and trying to, like I've gone on and on and on about, if we don't, the people on the front line, myself included when I was there, yourself included when you were there, actually it's the biggest resource that anybody has. And I'm with you, do you know, relationships are completely what changes lives. That's exactly what does it. And our frontline professionals are perfectly positioned to be able to do that. But yet, if we're not looking after them, then we can't expect them to deliver the services that complex and vulnerable people need. And we can't forget that they potentially might be complex and vulnerable as well at different points in their lives.
I mean, that's the other thing, you know, the majority of the English population have experienced at least one form of adversity. And 70% of people report one traumatic event in their life. Now, whilst most people cope with that in some way, there are equally lots of people that we know who've had multiple experiences or experiences that they haven't got over. And those people are us. They're the workforce, you know. So I think unless your organisation is acknowledging that you are a person too, and that maybe you went into this job for a reason, because it resonates with you, then that's another missed opportunity, you know, to create resilience in the workforce. And I think probably the third thing that came back to me when I read your chapter was, sometimes the organisation that you're working for espouses certain values, but they don't live them. You're not seeing that being played out in the way the organisation behaves, in the way that the culture shows up in the workplace, and in the way that sometimes the very senior leaders in those organisations behave as well. So sometimes you're kind of like, well, I know what my values and my moral compass is, but I don't feel I'm being looked after. And I don't also feel that the culture that I'm a part of is supporting these values being lived on a day-to-day basis. And that is when you feel, you talked in your book about cognitive dissonance, you know, that's when you feel, I'm a square peg in a round hole here. I don't think I can sustain my way of doing things and my beliefs in this context. It's just, I can't do it anymore because I'll become too much like this. And there is a really tough decision to be made when you find yourself in that position, because you think, well, can I change things? Or have I tried to change things and I've not got anywhere? Or do I have to protect myself and my values and my beliefs and my integrity, and I have to go somewhere else, you know? And I think sometimes, sadly, that is a choice that professionals have to make. Otherwise, the culture will assimilate you, you know?
I've seen that. I think we've seen, I've personally seen it, but I think we've seen it nationally over the last, some of the, I was going to say recent governmental changes, but actually they're not recent at all anymore. Do you know, we've seen some of the changes within social care, some of the changes within transforming rehabilitation, within criminal justice, and we've seen droves and droves of good values-led frontline practitioners leaving because actually they're not willing to work within the expectations that have been laid down. And actually one of the reasons why the methodology was even derived was to try and be a creative solution to actually help top up people's emotional resilience and to help them recognise on the training courses that are going on, irrelevant of the subject, to give them some of what they might not have been getting elsewhere. So actually that moment of, okay, actually everybody in this room, even if you don't feel like the sector is going in the right direction. Even if you don't feel like your organisation is living its mission, even if you think the values are incongruent to yours, look around you at the people in this room, the ones of you that are seeing people face to face every day, and let's take a moment to recognise the difference you're making in their world. And it's like I think I put in the book actually about I think it's a starfish parable that I put in there, and it's like have you seen that? You're not changing the world for everybody, but actually by throwing that one starfish back in, you're changing the world for that one starfish. Absolutely. And sometimes, certainly in my early career, sometimes that was all that got me through. Do you know, it was absolutely living for the delivery that I was giving to the service user.
And that's a really important point as well, isn't it? And I was thinking when I read that about the, making a difference one relationship at a time kind of idea, that when we evaluated the REACH program, where we asked people, we trained teams to ask about adversity, one of the things that came out was professionals said it reconnected them with their purpose for signing up to the job in the first place. It helped them feel compassion for their clients, and it helped them realize and feel that they were making a difference in somebody's life. And it was that one conversation about what had happened to you, how it's affected your life, and do you want some help with it? And they were feeling that was helping them avoid burnout.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you connect with your values, it is very sustaining. And I think you're right. You can be in a team where you're all sharing the same values and attitudes and behaviors, and you can be in an organization that isn't too healthy, but you can be doing really well and having a great time and having, living the best life you can in that professional role, because you've got a little bubble, a little microcosm. We're talking a lot about protected bubbles, but that can, I've worked in teams where the organization, frankly, I've not had a great deal of confidence in, but actually the team around me, that's all I've needed to get through, So yeah, absolutely. That's a really great example.
And I think from my perspective, it really is about, how can we, so ideally what I think would needs to happen within the sector, if we can, is let's get everybody to go on a program like the REACH program. So all of the frontline professionals, hundreds of thousands of them, actually, let's do it regularly as well. Not just one off, but actually as part of their CPD, they should be going on an intensive program and go on the training like the REACH program, and go through that process, and then have that opportunity to reset, reevaluate, and I guess restart to an extent as well. But realistically, the reason why we ended up driving the methodology is because the time, the money involved in sending people off onto a program like that, unfortunately, lots of people don't make that decision with their budgets. Now, if I could twist their arms, honestly, Warren, you would have a queue right round the country, and I know you absolutely, people come to you and they get so much benefit from it, but actually ideally every frontline professional would have some type of CPD that's specifically about them and their emotional resilience, rebuilding it, kind of filling their bucket back up so they can then continue delivering those services. But absolutely. In the absence of that, I think what we're trying to do is on their mandatory training that they have to go to, which most of them come to dragging their heels.
That's the good thing, it's mandatory. There's something really good about that, actually.
Well, what we've kind of done, and not everybody that delivers training for influence delivers mandatory training. So people deliver all sorts of different training and use the methodology. But actually, the special thing about it when we started deriving it was the fact that by putting the methodology on top of mandatory training, we were sneaking in, and nowhere near to the detail or impact they would have on a dedicated program like REACH, but actually introducing and reminding them on sessions that they have to come to of the importance of their emotional resilience and of their importance of valuing their service users.
What you described is absolutely what is possible, and what we need is that every professional who works in these sectors needs to do mandatory safeguarding training, or mandatory what's the word, de-escalation training, or all the different things you need to do. That, like you said, every one of those is an opportunity to reignite people's passion, to kind of get them back in touch with why they signed up, to kind of remember what put fire in the belly in the first place, you know.
Yeah.
And
And
well,
to influence the way that they work with service users, because
yeah,
quite often we'll have new people in the room who are ready to just literally take on everybody's perspectives.
yeah.
And it can be really powerful for a facilitator who's walked the walk to share some of their mistakes within that. And then we can also have some people in the room that kind of know a lot of different information. They've been around a while, but actually they've got a bit jaded now because they think that everybody's the same. Everybody that comes through is like the next person. So actually they're not treating people or giving them the opportunity to change like they would have done 15 years ago or whatever it is.
Well, I think, you know, what you're describing to me, in my last job as clinical network director for the Children and Families Service and Children and Families Network, every month I used to sit in these governance meetings with a big sheet of the mandatory training, and it'd tell me which services were compliant with the 90% requirement for mandatory training, and how much it was actually costing us when people didn't turn up, and how much it cost us when people went off sick and all of that. And it was like the Fourth Bridge. It was like one of those things where we never managed to, it was always about compliance, right? Had they done it? And what we didn't measure, what we didn't seem to focus on very often was, what difference has this made? You know, it's more about, well, we know we have to do it. We know it's important people do it. Have they done it? What we didn't talk a lot about was, what was the feedback people gave us from that? Did they feel that it was of value? Did they feel inspired? Did they feel reinvigorated? You know, and that's probably 99% of the organisations in the country that have a constant battle trying to just get people to comply with the mandatory regulations and the legal obligations. So I think by putting in your focus on meaning and values, and, you know, connecting people to why they started in mandatory training as well as other forms, but particularly mandatory training, which nobody wants to do. You know, imagine if they came up
to one that's training for influence accredited, then they want to come
right. Well, of course. So they come off that course and they go, do you know what? It's the first time I've done this safeguarding course, and I actually feel like it was really valuable. Or I've done this course 20 times in my NHS career, but this is the first time that I really felt it meant something to me. You know, that's an opportunity.
One of my favourite pieces of feedback actually is from a social worker of 25 years who says, I've been doing safeguarding training every year for 25 years. This is the first time I've enjoyed it, and the second time I've learned something, because the first time they learned something on the first one, and then they just thought it's been a waste of their life.
It in 18 years, and so you get
Whereas ours is then tailored to the needs of the delegates and the sector, etc. So, and then sneaking in all of the kind of the values-led parts. So that really is one of my favourite bits of feedback. It just made me go, yeah, that's exactly why we do it.
You need to put that on the cover of your book if you haven't already, probably.
Oh yeah, I don't think I have actually. Maybe.
Oh, there you go. You probably should.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to read the book. Well, read the introduction and the values chapter. I will send you the full book.
Please do. Yeah, I do. I will look forward to that.
Once I've got it. Is what I haven't said, and I guess I kind of should say on as we're live, really, is what was your overall perspective? I did say that I'd ask you live with
on the chapter and the introduction. I thought that, like I said at the beginning, I wish I'd had a framework in my mind when I started delivering courses to people like 20 years ago, because I think what you do is you make up as you go along. I think what you've presented is many years experience, you know, distilled into a methodology, and I think that's what's so attractive about it, is that there is a methodology to it. And the values chapter, so I've not read the whole book yet. I look forward to that, but I've read the values chapter, and yeah, all resonates with what I believe, and I think we've explored some of the important themes. But as I read it, I was kind of thinking about so many examples from my own career, about where it resonated and where I'd seen examples like that. And I thought the idea of the suitcase that we bring with us is a really powerful image. So I encourage people to read that, and I think that'll really resonate with people.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you, Warren. I really...
It's a pleasure. Thank you for trusting me with it.
But if people want to find out more about the REACH programme or about the Resilience Task Force, where can they find you and find out about your stuff?
Well, thank you for asking. You can find me at my website at www.warrenlarkinassociates.co.uk, and you can find the Resilience Task Force at www.resilience.taskforce.co.uk. And I'm on Twitter. I suppose I don't really do a huge amount of social media other than Twitter. So if you want to, it just forces me to stick to 240 characters. So
I think it's just an age thing, Warren.
Yeah, it probably is. Yeah, it probably
is.
Yeah.
A dominant platform.
Yeah, I can do Twitter because it just means typing a few words. It's quite simple. So yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Warren_Larkin, I think it is, or something like that. Anyway, all right. Thanks, Tammy. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Warren.